Can you make me come? The giant mail-order bride asked the virgin cowboy. He admitted, It was early morning in the small town of Red Creek. The sun was just rising, painting the wide sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Dust floated gently in the air as the town slowly came to life. Horses neighed softly in their stables, and the smell of fresh hay and earth mixed with the faint scent of coffee coming from the general store. Luke, a young cowboy, was already up. He had lived in Red Creek all his life, and his mornings always started the same way. He fed the horses, cleaned the barn, and checked the fences around his small ranch. Life was simple, and he liked it that way. Luke was quiet and shy, not much for talking, but he had a kind heart. Everyone in town respected him for his honesty and hard work. This morning felt different, though.
Luke had received a letter a week ago, one that made him both nervous and curious. It was from someone far away, a woman named Clara.
She had written to him through a mail-order bride service, hoping to find a new life in Red Creek. Luke had never met her, and the thought of meeting a stranger who wanted to share his simple life made him uneasy. As he swept the barn, he thought about what Clara might be like. Would she enjoy the quiet life of a ranch? Could she handle the early mornings and long days working with animals? Luke had to admit he was nervous about meeting her. He had always been shy around women, and the idea of someone new entering his life brought a mixture of excitement and fear. At the same time, he felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe Clara would understand him. Maybe she would appreciate the peaceful life he loved. Maybe she would even like the way he cared for his animals and his small ranch. The possibilities made his heart beat a little faster, even as his mind filled with doubts. By mid-morning, the sun was high, and Luke had finished his chores. He washed his hands, wiped the sweat from his brow, and glanced at the road leading into town. Breaths. Today, Clara was supposed to arrive. His stomach tightened at the thought. He had never been good with words, and the idea of talking to someone new made him anxious. Still, he felt a strange determination. He would do his best to welcome her no matter how nervous he felt. When the sound of a wagon rolled down the dirt road, Luke's heart skipped a beat. He looked up, squinting against the sunlight. A tall, gentle woman stepped down from the wagon. She had a bright smile and carried herself with confidence, though her eyes showed a mix of curiosity and nervousness. Clara. This was her. Luke felt a lump in his throat, and for a moment he couldn't think of a single word to say. Clara looked around, taking in the town, the horses, and the wide open sky. She seemed impressed by the calm and simplicity of Red Creek. Her eyes landed on Luke, and she gave him a small wave. Luke nodded, unsure if he should smile or just keep quiet. Clara laughed lightly, sensing his nervousness. Her laughter was soft but warm, and it made Luke's heart feel lighter. I hope I'm not too early, she said, her voice gentle. I've never been to a place like this before. Luke shook his head. No, you're right on time. I mean, welcome to Red Creek, he said, his words coming out awkwardly. He cleared his throat, wishing he could sound calmer. Clara smiled. Thank you, Luke. I'm glad to finally be here. They began walking toward the ranch, and Luke noticed how easily Clara observed everything around her. The animals, the fences, the small flowers growing by the barn. She seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about each detail. Luke tried his best to answer, and slowly the nervousness between them started to fade. By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was high and the warmth of the day settled over the land. Luke opened the barn and introduced Clara to the horses. She reached out, gently patting the nearest one, and it nickered in response. She laughed softly, and Luke felt a strange comfort in her presence.
"You really take care of them," Clara said. "I can see why you love this life so much." Luke nodded.
Breaths. I do. I. It's simple, but it's honest. You get used to it, and it feels like home. Break. Clara looked around again, her eyes thoughtful. I think I could learn to love it too. I've always wanted a place where I could feel peaceful. Luke felt a small smile tug at his lips. He was usually quiet, but something about Clara made it easier to talk. They spent the afternoon exploring the ranch, fixing a fence together and talking about small things, like the way the wind moved through the fields or the different birds they saw.
It was simple, ordinary work, but with Clara there, it felt special.
As the sun began to set, painting the sky with gold and pink, they sat on the porch, looking out over the land. Luke felt a mix of relief and excitement. Breath. Clara had arrived, and she was real. She was kind, curious, and gentle. But though he was still shy, he felt a connection forming, a quiet understanding that maybe, just maybe, this new chapter of life could be something wonderful.
That night, as they prepared dinner together, Luke realized that meeting Clara had changed something in him.
The nervousness was still there, but it was mixed with hope. For the first time in a long while, he felt that life could surprise him in good ways. And as Clara laughed at one of his awkward jokes, he couldn't help but think that maybe this was the start of something meaningful. A story that would grow slowly, like the flowers in the fields, strong and steady, full of life. The morning after Clara arrived, Luke woke to the soft chirping of birds outside his window. Sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, warming the small room where he slept. He stretched, trying to shake off the lingering sleepiness. Today felt like a day full of possibilities. Clara was still asleep in the guest room, and Luke found himself thinking about her before he even had coffee. He shook his head, wondering why meeting someone new could make him feel so alive. Breath. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of fresh bread and coffee. Luke prepared breakfast quietly, listening to the distant sounds of the town waking up. He thought about how unusual his life had become. For years it had been the same. Morning chores, working the land, feeding the animals, and quiet evenings by the fire. Now there was someone new to think about, someone who had stepped into his world unexpectedly. Clara emerged from the guest room, her hair tied loosely, her eyes bright and curious. "Good morning," she said softly, smiling. "I hope I didn't wake you too early."
Luke shook his head.
"No, not at all. Breakfast is almost ready." He poured coffee into mugs, his hands steady despite the slight nervousness he felt around her. Clara watched him for a moment, then reached for a slice of bread, spreading butter on it with careful precision. As they ate, they talked about small things: the sky, the animals, the sounds of the town. Clara asked about Luke's childhood, and he told her about growing up in Red Creek, learning to ride horses before he could even walk properly, and helping his parents with the ranch from a young age. She listened closely, asking questions that showed she genuinely cared.
After breakfast, Luke suggested they take a walk around the property. The land was wide and open, with rolling fields and a small stream running through it.
Clara followed him, taking in the beauty of the landscape. Breaths. She paused near a patch of wildflowers, kneeling down to examine them. "These are beautiful," she said softly. "I've never seen flowers like these before." Luke smiled. "They're hardy."
They grow wherever they can, kind of like people, I guess.
He didn't realize he had spoken aloud until he saw Clara looking at him with curiosity.
You mean people survive and grow even in tough places? She asked.
Yes, Luke said quietly. Even when things are hard, we find a way. Psst. She stood and looked out over the fields, the sunlight catching her hair. Luke noticed how naturally she seemed to fit into the quiet rhythm of the ranch, despite being from somewhere so far away. There was something comforting about having her there. Something that made the land feel less empty.
As they walked, they encountered the horses. Luke showed Clara how to groom them, explaining each step with patience.
Clara laughed a little when a horse nudged her shoulder, but she quickly recovered, gently patting its mane. "They seem to like me," she said with a small grin. "They're smart," Luke replied. "They can tell when someone is kind." The rest of the morning passed with small chores and laughter. They repaired a section of fence together, carrying wooden planks and hammering nails. Clara was careful and determined, listening to Luke's instructions and asking questions when she was unsure. Luke admired her patience and willingness to learn. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Curious, confident, yet humble in her approach. By midday, they stopped for lunch on the porch. Luke prepared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh fruit. They ate in companionable silence, watching the clouds drift lazily across the blue sky. Clara broke the silence with a question about Luke's favorite memories. He thought for a moment, then spoke of his childhood adventures, the first time he rode a horse alone, and the summers spent fishing with his father. Clara listened, her eyes wide with interest. "You had a happy childhood," she said softly. "I did," Luke admitted. "But it was simple. Not exciting, but it was mine." Clara nodded, understanding. "I guess. Simple can be good. It lets you see the beauty in little things." In the afternoon, Luke decided to take Clara to the small town nearby. She had never been to a western town before, and he thought it would be good for her to see where he lived and meet some of the townspeople. As they walked down the dusty streets, people waved and greeted them. Clara responded with polite smiles, and Luke could see the townspeople warming up to her. They visited the general store, where the owner, Mrs. Harper, welcomed Clara warmly. "Bish, you must be the new lady Luke's been talking about," she said kindly. "I hope you'll like Red Creek." "I think I already do," Clara replied with a smile. Next, they stopped at the small bakery. Clara picked out some pastries, insisting that Luke try one with her. As they shared the treat, Luke noticed how easy it felt to be around her. For the first time, he realized that he didn't feel shy or awkward. He felt calm, as if he could be himself. Back at the ranch, they spent the evening tending to the animals and preparing dinner. Clara helped Luke in the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring the pot. They talked about dreams, hopes, and the lives they had left behind.
Luke admitted that he had always wanted companionship, someone to share his quiet life with, but he had never imagined it could happen so suddenly.
Clara shared stories of her hometown, her family, and the journey that had brought her to Red Creek. As night fell, they sat on the porch again, the stars shining bright overhead. Luke pointed out constellations, telling Clara stories of the sky, of legends and folklore passed down in the town. She listened intently, occasionally asking questions, occasionally laughing softly at his attempts to make the stories dramatic. "Do you make it sound magical?" she said at one point. Luke smiled. "It is magical, if you know where to look." There was a comfortable silence between them, the kind that doesn't feel awkward but natural, as if the world had slowed down just for a moment. Luke realized that he was beginning to trust Clara, not just as a visitor, but as someone who could understand him. She had arrived in his life suddenly, like a surprise wind, but now she felt like part of it. A gentle presence that brought warmth and light. Before heading inside for the night, Luke showed Clara the small guest room where she would be staying. She thanked him and settled in, looking around with curiosity.
Luke stepped outside, taking a deep breath of the cool night air.
He felt contentment he hadn't known he could feel. Meeting Clara had brought a new rhythm to his days, and he was beginning to imagine a future where this quiet, simple life could be shared. As he closed the door to the barn and prepared for bed, Luke couldn't help but smile. He had always thought life in Red Creek would be lonely, but now he saw that companionship could arrive unexpectedly. And though he was still shy and unsure in many ways, he felt hope growing inside him. A hope that maybe, just maybe, Clara's arrival was the start of something truly meaningful. The next morning, Red Creek woke to a soft mist that hung over the fields. Luke stepped outside, feeling the cool dampness on his boots. The air smelled fresh, earthy, and full of possibility. He glanced at the guest room window, hoping Clara had slept well. She had been adjusting quickly, but he knew that life on a ranch was different from anything she had experienced before. When Clara came outside, she was carrying a basket of fresh eggs from the henhouse. Her hair was tied back neatly, and a determined look settled on her face. "Good morning, Luke," she called. "I thought I'd start the day by helping with the chickens." Luke smiled. "That's great. You'll learn fast. Just be careful, some of them can be feisty." "Feisty? I like a challenge." The morning passed with laughter and small lessons. Clara proved to be a quick learner, gently collecting eggs while avoiding the pecking hens. Luke watched her, impressed by her patience and persistence. He realized that she wasn't just brave in a physical sense. She had the courage to step into an entirely new life, one that could be difficult and unpredictable. After breakfast, they decided to take the wagon to a nearby creek to gather fresh water and check the fences along the northern fields. The path was rough and the wagon jostled as they traveled, but Clara seemed to enjoy the ride, her laughter mixing with the creaking of the wagon wheels. Luke felt his heart lighten with each smile she gave him. At the creek, they worked together to fill barrels of water. Clara carefully balanced the heavy pail, while Luke showed her the best way to lift without straining her back. She listened attentively, nodding as she learned, and occasionally offered her own ideas about how to make the work easier.
"You know," she said, "this is hard work, but it feels good."
I like knowing I'm helping in a real way. Luke nodded.
"That's the best part of life here. You do the work, you see the results. But no pretending, no shortcuts." As they rested by the water, Clara asked Luke more about his past. He told her about his younger brother who had moved to the city years ago, and about his parents who had passed on the ranch to him. Clara listened with empathy, and Luke felt a rare comfort in sharing memories that were usually private. Suddenly a noise came from the trees nearby, a rustling that made the horses nervous. Luke stood quickly, scanning the area. A small herd of deer emerged from the woods, their delicate legs moving gracefully over the earth. Clara gasped softly, enchanted by the sight. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They are," Luke said, smiling. "It's moments like this that make all the hard work worth it." After the deer disappeared, they continued checking the fences. One of the posts had weakened, and Luke showed Clara how to secure it with extra support. She watched closely, mimicking his movements. Luke found himself amazed at how quickly she adapted. By late afternoon, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the fields.
Clara suggested they try planting a small garden near the barn.
Luke agreed, thinking it would be a nice project for both of them. They dug small holes, planted seeds, and watered the soil, laughing when a stray root or clump of dirt caused minor mishaps. "You know," Clara said, wiping dirt from her hands. I never imagined life could be so real. Every moment feels meaningful here. Luke nodded. It is real, Bray, and it's better when someone else shares it with you. As evening approached, a sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering over Red Creek. Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, turning the dirt paths to mud. Luke and Clara hurried back to the barn, helping the horses to shelter. The sound of the rain hitting the roof was loud, yet comforting. Inside the barn, they worked quickly to secure loose equipment and make sure the animals were safe. Clara moved with surprising efficiency, carrying water buckets and checking the horses with care.
Luke noticed how naturally she had become part of the routine.
It was clear she wasn't just visiting. She was building a life here. When the barn chores were done, they stood outside for a moment, watching the rain wash over the fields. Clara smiled despite the soaking clothes and mud-streaked boots.
It's beautiful, she said softly. Luke agreed, feeling the truth in her words. It is. Even storms can be beautiful when you look at them the right way.
Back inside the house, they dried off and prepared a simple dinner.
As they ate, the conversation turned to their hopes for the future. Clara admitted she had been nervous about leaving her hometown, unsure if she could adjust to life on a ranch.
Luke shared his own worries about whether she would like the quiet, demanding lifestyle he had always known. But we're learning together, Clara. And somehow it feels easier than I expected. Luke smiled, feeling a warmth he had not felt before.
Yes.
Together.
After dinner, they decided to spend the evening repairing an old wooden gate near the barn.
Luke handed Clara tools, explaining each step patiently. Clara listened and learned quickly. And together they managed to fix the gate before nightfall. Their teamwork felt natural, and Luke realized that having Clara here made even the hardest work feel lighter. Once the gate was secure, they sat on the porch, the night air filled with the scent of wet earth and fresh rain. The stars began to appear, one by one in the clear sky. Luke pointed out constellations, sharing the stories behind them. Baba. Clara listened intently, occasionally asking questions, occasionally making jokes that made Luke laugh. For the first time in a long while, Luke felt truly seen. Clara wasn't just polite or curious. She genuinely cared about his world, his work, and his thoughts. And he found himself opening up to her, sharing small details about his life, his dreams, and even his fears. Clara, in turn, shared her own stories about her family, her journey to Red Creek, and her hopes for a new life. Luke listened with admiration, realizing that she had courage he had never fully acknowledged before. She had left everything familiar behind to take a chance on something unknown, and that bravery inspired him. By the time they went inside to rest for the night, a quiet understanding had formed between them. They had faced the day's work, a storm, and new challenges together, and they had done so with respect, patience, and laughter. Brave child. Luke felt a growing sense of trust and companionship with Clara, a feeling that made the quiet ranch feel more alive and welcoming than ever before.
As they prepared for bed, Luke glanced at Clara, who was arranging her small room with care.
He realized that she was already beginning to make this place home. Not just the house, but the land, the ranch, and even his life. And in that realization, Luke felt a hopeful excitement for the days ahead, knowing that the bond they were forming could grow stronger with each sunrise. The morning air in Red Creek was crisp and calm. Breaths, sunlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows over the fields. Luke woke to the sound of birds singing and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. For the first time since Clara had arrived, he felt a sense of peace that went deeper than simple routine. It was the feeling of life opening up in ways he had never imagined. Clara was already outside, tending to the flowers they had planted near the barn. desperation. She smiled when she saw Luke step onto the porch. "Good morning," she called. "Shh. I thought I'd start the day with some gardening before breakfast." Luke nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest. "Morning."
That's a good idea. The flowers look better every day.
She laughed softly.
Thanks.
I hope they'll bloom nicely. It feels good to see life grow from something small.
They worked together for a while, watering and planting new seeds. The rhythm of their movements was comfortable, and neither felt rushed.
Clara's enthusiasm and care brought a brightness to the ranch, and Luke found himself smiling more freely than he had in years. After breakfast, Luke suggested they take a walk to the northern fields to inspect the fences and check on the animals. Clara agreed eagerly, enjoying the feeling of wide-open space and fresh air. The path to the northern fields was lined with wildflowers, and Clara paused occasionally to examine the blooms or watch the birds flying overhead. As they worked through the day, repairing fences and feeding the animals, Luke noticed how naturally Clara had become part of the rhythm of the ranch. She was no longer a visitor. She was a partner, learning and contributing, curious and patient. He realized that the initial nervousness he had felt when she arrived had been replaced by trust, admiration, and a quiet happiness that filled the long hours of labor. During a short break by the creek, Clara asked Luke about his dreams for the future. He thought for a moment, then spoke slowly.
"I've always imagined living a simple life, keeping the ranch, taking care of the animals. I didn't think
it could be shared like this. I thought it would always be just me." Clara listened closely, her eyes soft with understanding. "Life is better when shared," she said gently.
Breath. You've built something beautiful here. I want to be part of it, not to change it, but to grow with it."
Luke felt a warmth spread through him. He had always been shy and unsure around people, especially women. But Clara had come into his life like sunlight breaking through clouds, unexpected yet necessary.
"I'd like that,"
he said quietly, unsure if he could convey the depth of his feelings. They spent the afternoon planting a small vegetable garden near the barn. It was hard work turning the soil and planting seeds, but the two of them laughed at their mistakes, encouraged each other, and celebrated small successes. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, the garden was ready, a symbol of their shared effort and growing partnership. As evening fell, the sky turned gold and pink, reflecting in the calm waters of the creek. Luke and Clara stood side by side, watching the sunset. For a while they didn't speak, letting the beauty of the moment fill the silence. "You know," Clara said finally, "I never imagined a life like this. Quiet, simple, and full of small wonders.
It feels right."
Luke nodded, his gaze following hers across the fields. "It does, Bree."
"And it feels better with you here." Dinner that night was a simple meal, but it felt like a celebration.
They shared stories of their pasts, laughed at small mistakes of the day, and planned for the weeks ahead. Luke realized that Clara's presence had changed more than just the ranch. She had changed him. He felt more confident, more open, and more alive. After dinner, they decided to take a short walk into town. Bread Creek was quiet in the evening, the streets empty except for the soft glow of lanterns. People waved as they passed, and some stopped to chat briefly. Clara enjoyed meeting more of the townspeople, asking questions about their lives and learning about the community. Luke watched her, feeling a deep sense of pride. She was adapting beautifully, and her warmth made everyone feel welcome. Back at the ranch, they returned to the porch, settling into a comfortable silence. The stars shone brightly overhead, and the soft chirping of crickets filled the night air. Luke felt a sense of calm he had never known before. Clara's laughter, curiosity, and care had brought a new rhythm to his life, and he couldn't imagine returning to the quiet solitude of the past.
You've made this place feel more like home than I ever thought possible, Luke said quietly.
Clara smiled, her eyes reflecting the starlight.
And you've shown me that life can be simple and beautiful if you care for it, and for the people in it. For the first time, Luke realized that this was more than just a friendship forming. It was a bond built on trust, respect.
They had faced challenges together, adapted to unexpected events, and learned from one another. The quiet life of Red Creek had become richer and more meaningful with Clara's presence.
As they prepared for bed, Luke looked at the stars once more, thinking about how much had changed since Clara arrived. Life on the ranch would always be hard work, but now it was work filled with purpose and companionship.
He felt grateful for the chance meeting, for the courage Clara had shown in leaving her home, and for the unexpected happiness that had entered his life. That night, as the wind rustled the trees outside and the ranch lay calm, Luke realized that life could surprise a person in the most wonderful ways. Clara's arrival had been sudden, but it had brought balance, joy, and hope. He felt a quiet excitement for the days ahead, knowing that together they could face whatever challenges came their way.
The next morning brought the promise of new adventures.
They planned to expand the garden, repair the old barn roof, and perhaps even explore the nearby hills. Every task, every moment, now had shared meaning. Luke felt a deep sense of connection to Clara, one that went beyond words. She had become part of his life in a way that felt natural, strong, and lasting.
By the end of the week, Luke and Clara had settled into a steady rhythm. Mornings were for chores and caring for the animals, afternoons for projects and small adventures, and evenings for conversation and quiet reflection.
Life had become predictable in the most comforting way, and Luke discovered that routine could be joyful when shared with the right person.
As the sun set one evening, Luke and Clara sat together on the porch, watching the sky turn shades of gold and orange. Luke felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had imagined a life of solitude, of quiet and routine, but now he understood that companionship could make even simple tasks feel meaningful. Clara had brought laughter, curiosity, and warmth into his world.
"I'm glad you came," Luke said softly, breaking the comfortable silence. Clara looked at him, smiling gently. "Denz. Me too. I never expected to feel so at home so quickly." They sat together in silence for a long moment, letting the calmness of the evening settle over them. The ranch, the animals, the fields, and the sky, all of it now felt alive in a new way, colored by trust, friendship, and growing love. Luke realized that this was the start of a life he had never dared to imagine. A life shared with someone who understood him, appreciated the simple beauty of each day, and brought light to the quiet corners of his heart. The future was no longer uncertain. It was full of promise, hard work, laughter, and the gentle joy of companionship. As night fell and the stars sparkled overhead, Luke and Clara went inside, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring, together. And for the first time in his life, Luke felt completely, undeniably, and gratefully at home.